everyone, and welcome to Trailblazin with Tara Misu, the podcast where we try to put the fun back into cannabis while sharing a little insider wisdom and chatting with some amazing guests. All right, today we have a New Jersey cannabis rock star. If you Google someone kicking ass in cannabis in New Jersey right now, Scott's name will probably be the first result. He is the president and founder of the New Jersey CannaBusiness Association, the state's first and largest cannabis trade organization, which is also the one I've had the absolute amazing experience of helping him run. Scott is a former state assemblyman and was the mayor of Medford and has been working in government affairs for over 2 decades. He speaks regularly at events across the nation about cannabis legalization. And like me, he wakes up every day and fights for our patients and our rights as Americans to safely consume cannabis. He is a Republican, but probably the coolest one I know, so don't hold that against him.
Well, you only know 2, right? I mean, so.
I only know 2, and the other one's an asshole. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and mentor, Mr. Scott Rudder.
Hey, thank you very much, Tara. I'm glad to be here.
You're welcome. All right, so I did say I want to dig into some of the things you talk about less, but it might just be because I hear you talk so often. But so a story I like, and you could say whatever you like. How'd you come up with the idea for NJCBA?
Well, actually, it was born out of a visit, right? So we did a trip. I was on, so Senator Nick Scutari, he's the main champion and has been for the past couple of decades on cannabis legalization, both for patients and adult use. He had a delegation trip where he went out to Colorado and he invited members of the Senate and the assemblies, Republicans, Democrats, and some industry folks. He invited me to go along with him. So we went out there. It was actually right around now, 3 years ago, quite frankly. It was October of 2016. And we went out there, and I was really curious about it. I mean, it's something I've been following. You know, when I was in the legislature, we had the vote on medical cannabis. There's a lot of controversy back then, and it passed by just a very small margin. Even Governor Corzine, who signed the bill, he signed it on the very last day of office. So, you know, just to let you know, like in 2009, it was very controversial. But fast forward.
Oh, isn't that like typically what they do? They try to put a bunch of things they wanted to do on the last day and then sneak out.
Yeah. Right. But it's
Okay.
something but that was an issue that could have been done a year ago, a year prior and all that stuff. But he's like, although he signed the bill, he reluctantly signed the bill, to your point, like on the last day. So anyway, fast forward, there we are. It's 2016. It's October. Delegation trip out to Colorado. I mean, we met with their Division of Taxation, Department of Health, law enforcement, their elected officials. We toured facilities. You know, I come from a high-tech background. I worked for Lockheed Martin Corporation for nearly 15 years, and very high-tech stuff going on there. There's a lot of precision, a lot of quality control goes in there. When we toured these facilities, I mean, we had to put masks on, robes on, and they even though the FDA doesn't monitor just yet, it doesn't enforce the policies just yet on the cannabis industry, everybody that we met with built their infrastructure to FDA standards. It was very impressive. So, again, came back from that trip and just felt like, okay, this is something we absolutely have to do for lots of good reasons. And so I met with a couple folks. We reached out we decided that, New Jersey at the time just had 2 organizations. I mean, they're phenomenal organizations. So you had the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey. Ken Walski runs that, an amazing group. They did a phenomenal job for patients in getting the first bill passed to begin with. And then you had New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform. So you had a social justice leadership, you had a patient leadership, but there was nothing there for the business side, right? So the industry, what should the industry look like? When we developed this, what should it encompass? So talked to a bunch of people, formed a small board. We created a nonprofit organization. We became New Jersey's very first nonprofit trade organization for the cannabis industry.
Okay, that you're very shy. I need you to talk more. Okay.
Okay. Every 10 minutes, 5 minutes each time, each question, 5 minutes.
Okay. No, you're fine. So that's great. So NJCBA, it's been doing amazing. I'm going to jump ahead to something I was going to talk about, but you've had such longevity, and we've seen a lot of organizations in cannabis come and go. What do you think has really set your group apart to stay very relevant the entire time in the industry?
Well, we're being true to what our charter is, right? So we are a trade organization. So whether you're the Bankers Association, the Realtors Association, Basically every industry has some trade group that represents them at the State House, and they fight for or against things. So that's been our model. So we've been fighting for legalization. We've been fighting to make sure that we have the right infrastructure there, that we're capturing all the good things that we need to do, like focusing on social justice issues, making sure that there's an expansion for patients. So we've been doing those things, and then we do some fun networking things. We've had some social networking events where people get together at night. We've done some educational programming. We've done some workshops. So our model is diversified model, but again, our focus has been fighting for legalization efforts and patient rights.
So, coming from a conservative background, what were kind of some of the reactions you got from your peers, your family, from anyone when you said, "Hey guys, I'm going to do cannabis"?
Well, and I know when I say this, it doesn't always come across great, but it is actually a conservative issue, right? I mean, if you want less government on something, this is a phenomenal.
And it has nothing to do with money, right?
What?
When you say cannabis being a conservative issue, there's some money in there now.
Well, would you have conservative principles, right? So
Yes.
A conservative principle is less government.
Yes.
And so if you know factually that, for example, cannabis is healthier than alcohol, we know factually that cannabis is healthier than a lot of FDA-approved prescription drugs, and you know this to be true, and then you look at the cost of what happens to society. If we're arresting, New Jersey has the third highest arrest rate in the country for simple possession of cannabis, period. We arrest more than 34,000 people in 2017, 32,000 people in 2016. That trajectory is going up. So you look at the cost of that from a human capital perspective. So we're taking so many people off the street. They're incarcerating, we're giving them criminal records. They're losing their jobs, they're leaving their spouses. They can't get into college, they can't get into the military, they can't get a loan. I mean, for years and years and years, the rest of their lives are going to be carrying that around with them. So you look at that, that's a human capital. Then you look at the cost, right? So New Jersey spends about $145 million a year incarcerating people. So even from a taxpayer perspective, that's a significant waste of money. We should be generating tens of thousands of jobs and not arresting tens of thousands of people. We can be generating $300 million in new revenue instead of spending $145 million. So from a conservative perspective, this makes perfect sense. And then going into the business infrastructure, we want this to be set up right. We want to make sure it's responsible. We want to make sure that there's quality assurances and there's testing involved, and that patients or future adult consumers, when they're going to buy their package, they see exactly what's in there. So yeah, no, absolutely.
So if this could be appealing to conservatives, then how come we're having so much trouble getting some of them on board?
Yeah.
And personally, as someone who was a legislator in your voting history, I know you abstained previously. Mm-hmm. What could have taken you from that to being a yes vote, and how can we get the current people to be a yes vote?
And that's the big question, right? So in 2009, when the medical cannabis legislation was up, I did abstain, and that was under 2009 knowledge, right? So like a lot of my friends today, they haven't delved in. Back in 2009, we were pretty much concerned about if we legalize it for patient use, and if we go down this path, and then you had all the concerns about proliferation, you had concerns about kids getting access and all that kind of stuff, antiquated information, antiquated thought process. Since that point, when I had the opportunity to meet with one of the parents of a child with severe seizure disorders, when we had an opportunity to reopen up the legislation again and then allow kids to have access to medical cannabis, I voted yes on that one. I voted because then you could see this is not just for something that was a limited use for certain very minor medical conditions. So at the time, you're thinking glaucoma, you're thinking maybe some cancer, and limited ways it could be utilized. It wasn't until a couple years later, when you're starting to see the expansion of the program, you're starting to get more information out there, more states have come online, that you're seeing kids with seizure disorders, Dravet syndrome. There are people that they go through 100, 200 seizures a day, and then you give them some CBD, and then they go from 100 to 200 a day to 2 or 3 times a month. That's a quality of life game changer. And so for me, that's where, so that was in 2013. For me, that was my transitional point and the pivot to, this is a medicine first, and that we have this opportunity. And as legislators, we need to be responsible and not get in between, a decision between a mother and a daughter and a doctor. I mean, that's something legislators shouldn't do.
For sure. And I would think at this point, because there is so much education out there, most people are on board with medical. But I know both of us are constantly going around the state and shouting from the rooftops, we need to get adult use done. And how do we take the more conservative mindset and bring them over to the adult use side?
It's facts. And it's like I said, at the end of the day, a lot of conservatives, a lot of my peers in the state legislature, they're looking at this from a social perspective, right? They think that this is a bad thing because the only real investigation that they've done is watching Fast Times at Ridgemont High or a Cheech and Chong movie, right? So
which are excellent,
phenomenal movies. Not taking anything away from the quality of the movie, but unless you've seen the impact of cannabis on a patient, or you just knowing the facts that they are today. So, for example, in Colorado, people, when we talk about, so you go around the state as well, and when we talk to legislators and community leaders, what do they care about? They care about teenage use.
They care about their votes.
They care about teenage use. They care about drunk driving because the people that vote for them, the voters, right? So that's what they're concerned about. So we, as an organization and partnering with other organizations, we've been out there educating, and you can see the impact it's have. Recent poll just came out the other day. We're at 66% approval rating for cannabis legalization. Yeah. 51% of Republicans finally. So we've crossed over on the Republican side even. So Democrats and independents have been there for a longer period of time because they look at this differently. But from a conservative Republican perspective, and you're looking at right and wrong and black and white, and you're looking at this from a perspective of, well, you shouldn't have been doing it anyway, kid. Yeah. That's unfortunate because they know now. So we're seeing teenage use go down in Colorado. We're seeing the positive impact of a regulated industry. We're learning now we've known this for a while, but we're seeing it really hit in a manner which we can measure. Keeping the illicit market the way it is, keeping prohibition the way it is, keeping the status quo has failed. And it can be counted in terms of lives and dollars lost. I mean, people have lost their lives through this process. Bad drug deals, police going into the wrong house. I mean, it's just
people have lost their lives in the past few months due to tainted vape cartridges, which wouldn't have existed if we had a regulated market.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about putting a spotlight on why we need to have a regulated industry. While testing is critical. Yeah. When you ingest something, you should know that it's been tested and not something that's just been sent through the mail to somebody else and it was sold to you and blah blah blah. You don't know where that came from. Yeah. Wouldn't it be better and smarter to go down to the store, down the street, or town over, where they are employing people, where they're paying taxes, and you go in there and you're carded before you can even enter the retail section? Wouldn't that be smarter?
Yeah. And you know what? Instead, we're getting pushed back in the opposite direction, where you look at some place like Massachusetts, where their response to the vape ban, the vape crisis has been a ban. 4 months, no legal vape cartridges. Right. Well, that's great. Let's drive everyone back to the black market.
No, exactly, and that's exactly what's going to happen there. Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, we have a great great leadership in the New Jersey Department of Health. Jeff Brown runs that program, and they put out stringent guidelines on what can and cannot be in vape cartridges, right? And so there's never been an incident in New Jersey from a legally purchased medical cannabis vape cartridge where they caused any issues. So
do you know? So I don't think I got the statistic from you. So how many there's been in America vape related, not necessarily deaths. I think the death is still at 12, but occurrences.
Nope. Yeah. So
800.
Yeah, there was more. It's crossed over 1,000.
Is it over 1,000?
It's over 1,000.
Do you know how many Canada has?
And in Canada, there's been one.
So good at this.
So that's the thing, right? So you look at Canada, the entire country's legal, right? So province by province, it's legal there, and their adult use and medical program are moving forward and very regulated all through testing. And one incident out of the entire country, we've had 1,000, and this just shows when we have state by state different rules and regulations and how it's and how they're being utilized. And again, the black market, the illicit market that's out there, people are. There's two guys in a Midwest state, and it's just escaping right now, like Michigan, Wisconsin. The two guys in a condo that they rented under a fictitious name. They had 10 people working for them in this condo, filling up vape cartridges, thousands of them, and they had those bad ingredients in there. Mm-hmm. So now there's tens of thousands of vape cartridges going across the United States, and people getting them, and they're thinking it must be safe. It must be okay. It looks like they were They were packaged. They got their packaging from China, so it looked like a legitimate thing, but it was not. And so when we start to clean up the illicit market, you're going to see the benefits of that. Having things tested and proven is very valuable for patients and consumers, and patients especially, because they're the most vulnerable. You have patients with certain conditions, and they will be exacerbated by, even bacteria and fungus that's in flour.
Sure.
So you have bacteria and fungus in flour when it's not done right, when it's not cured right, when it's not been tested, and we've seen that happen. We've seen patients with leukemia die because their immune system's so weak that when they ingest bacteria into their system, it just ravages their body, and two folks passed in California a couple years ago because of that.
And this, I think, is the best argument for not having decriminalization, because that, I think, would be the strongest driver of the black market. I mean, personally, like I've been working above board my entire cannabis career. I'm applying for a license now, and I won't be making edibles till I get one. Unless they decriminalize, because I've done the math on this, and if it's a $50 fine, I could get a $50 fine every single day. And at the end of the year, it would cost me $18,000, which, with no licensing, no overhead, making brownies in my kitchen, no permits, no OSHA, that's what it costs to apply for a license. So you're talking about an extremely profitable business with absolutely no penalties and no regulations. Yeah. So
no, you're right, and decriminalization really does it. While it sounds good, and it's got to be part of the overall legalization effort, right? So when we're talking about this, it needs to be decriminalized, and it only when it's in conjunction with, a safe way to get your products, right? Yeah. Because otherwise, you're just saying you're not solving the problem of people interacting with drug dealers who are bad actors, right? So the folks who have more than just cannabis in their pocket.
I'm going to be the nicest drug dealer.
Well, no, you won't, because you're going to get a license. You're going to do things by the book. But you get these folks out there, they have more than just pot in their pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, the guy that was busted, I just read it in the paper the other day, I'm sure you have, Google alerts with marijuana in there, and you get these things. And some dude in New Jersey got busted with selling cannabis, selling weed, and he had a bunch of opioids on him too. And what happens when the opioids run out? And it's that 15-year-old, that 12-year-old, drug dealers don't card, dispensary operators do. That's part of our mantra. And it's because drug dealers don't care if you're 12, if you're 15, or if you're 25 or 50. Yeah. You can't enter a dispensary in New Jersey, and that's really for the public here. Like, people need to really understand that, a 15-year-old, my 15-year-old daughter, 16-year-old daughter could walk into a liquor store, buy a bag of chips and a bottle of Pepsi, and walk out. You can't enter to a dispensary until you've already proven that you're 21. You have to be 21 just to get into the retail section. I mean, the way that it's regulated here in New Jersey and most states, and they have those strict rules, and it has having a positive impact. That's why you're seeing cannabis use rates amongst teenagers going down across the country, not just Colorado, across the country.
Well, it's not cool anymore when your dad and your uncle are doing it. You're not rebelling,
right?
So now you got to do something else to rebel.
That's another factor.
Got to pierce something.
100%.
So that brings me to a question. So, as such a prominent figure in New Jersey, and you're also a patient, what's the message, or how do you deal with your kids and telling them what's your message on cannabis?
Just be honest. I mean, I look. Adolescent brains don't stop growing until they're 25. I mean, so we're talking to alcohol, cannabis, cough syrup. I mean, we need to be cautious about a lot of things that we ingest, particularly for those who are still developing. So we want to make sure that they understand it. And I when I sort of came out of the cannabis closet, if you will, when we created this organization, I went right to my kids, because I knew that, hey, look, a teacher's going to ask them, hey, is that your dad that's trying to legalize pot or something like that? And I just wanted them to know what it is. And so, I was fortunate. One of my dear friends, one of our board members, Rob Cresson, they know Rob very well. He's a very dear friend of mine. He has a very significant disorder. It's called chronic regional pain syndrome. He talks about it a lot. He testified before committees. They know Rob as a patient. So it's really easy for them, because, again, this is 3 years ago. So they're 13-year-old and 10 and 7, right? So they had young kids, and they easily understood Rob's condition. They understood the dangers of opioids and how people are transitioning off of opioids to cannabis. So I talked to them a lot about that. And then as they got older, I got deeper into the conversations, and I just say, hey, look, this is not something you should do. This is something you should wait on, just like we say with no matter what it is. But if you're going to make a mistake, I'd rather you make a mistake with cannabis instead of alcohol. I mean, if you're going to do something that's going to be like that, you're better off doing it this way. And I stressed the fact that you wait. Be old enough, be mature enough, be around the right folks. Be 18, be 21. So I do, as a responsible parent, share all those things, and we do act on it at home. So there's nothing there. But I will tell you this: that whether you're a parent, we're talking about alcohol or cannabis or whatever, you got to be open and got to be honest with them. Look, kids are gonna, you're a teenager at one point.
Well, you know what? I'm always trying to work the loopholes. So my mother gave me a similar message, and she said, Tara, I don't care if you're gonna drink, that's your own decision, but I want you to be safe. I don't want you to drink and drive. So if you are drinking, just let me know and just give me a call.
Yeah.
And I never slept home a weekend in high school again.
Well, that's the thing, right? But you're being safe.
Yeah.
And I
every weekend, hey mom, I shouldn't drive.
I shouldn't drive,
But
that's your mom doing a mom thing, right?
Yeah.
And so we're all doing this now. Look, cannabis. First of all, let's be honest, right? So cannabis is around for teenagers since the 60s. Before that, I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, but became more prevalent, more visible in the 60s and 70s. So my teenage years were the 80s, and I, look, it was around then. You could easily get it now, just like you could easily get it now. Mm-hmm. So if it's going to be something that's out there, you do want it to be in a legal process. You do want to make sure that that it's gone through quality control and testing and all those other things that are not talking to drug dealers. Yeah. I mean, if they steal it from an older brother or something like that, and they've gone through and it's a legally purchased thing, then that's what happens, right? Teenagers are going to be teenagers. They're going to experiment. They're going to make some bad decisions along the way. And for me, as a parent, just like, I know how your mom was towards you, it's like the bottom line is be safe. Be smart, be safe.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think we're going to eventually phase out the black market. Some people disagree with me, but like how people aren't making gin in their bathtub anymore. Right. And how long of a timeline you think before we really clean it up?
Well, I think, bathtub gin, right? So you look at prohibition and bathtub gin, people, look, when we had alcohol prohibition in the 20s and it ended in the early 30s, bathtub gin things hung around for a little while, but they eventually go away, right? Yeah. Because one, you can't control the quality. I mean, sometimes you got drunk off a bathtub gin, sometimes you went blind, right? So people want to know that the product that they're purchasing is something that's going to, again, has gone through some quality testing. It has something that what the ingredients are. So the illicit market for alcohol faded, all the bootleg stuff faded within a couple of years because
I used to say you can't get moonshine anymore, but I've had some amazing apple pie moonshine in the past few years. So hey, look, I had to move to bathtub gin.
Well, again, but even that, even today, by today's standards, at least you know what's going in there. But they were putting kerosene back then. I mean, you don't know. And it's the same thing with vape cartridges. They were like the illegal vape cartridges that were created. They put vitamin E acetate in there, and I'm sure the folks were like, hey, it's vitamin E. It's probably not bad, right? I mean, they probably thought, in the back of their mind, like, because they don't have a background. They're not a scientist. They never went through any schooling. And they're like, hey, put some vitamin E in there. Let's cut it. And people were dying from that. Yeah. And the same thing when they were back then, too. So, look, I don't know exactly when because, this is going to be a state-by-state issue. But I think in states that are legalized, the illicit market is going to shrink significantly in short order because people are going to want to be assured that the product that they're consuming has been tested at some level and you can read the ingredients. And I think the vape crisis is what sort of put a spotlight on that.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I never, if I know something, I try to educate people, but when I don't, I don't. And there's a certain point, where we do have to turn this over to the scientists in the labs and say, look, we have a great grassroots movement here. We have some great growers and processors in the country, but let's also get some scientists in here and make sure what we're doing is at a pharmaceutical level, even for adult use.
Right.
Yeah. So, I want to say, so we know that I want to keep this evergreen, so I don't want to talk too much about New Jersey legalization. I know we're trying to get this done in the lame duck session this year, and I know I knew it was over 60%. I didn't know we're up to 66. That's actually awesome. Isn't that kind of misdistributed, though, with the Republican? Because even if it's 51%, that doesn't guarantee it's per district the numbers we need.
Well, that goes – so most legislators, they want to reflect their district. So, you don't see – legislators that take a lead, like take Nick Scutari – 15 years ago. I mean, he tells a story all the time. There was a senior senator who put his hand on Nick's shoulder and said, son, you're not going to have a short career here as a senator if you're going to continue down this path. Nick had the guts to move forward on that and stick with it year after year, and he finally got the first one through, which was medical, and the expansion through, and now we're on the precipice of adult use. So, but most legislators are not Nick Scutari. Most legislators are sitting there, they're reflecting their district. And so as we're seeing, though, right, so the Assembly had majority of the Assembly, everybody talks about it, whether you're Assemblyman Jamal Holloway or the Speaker, the votes were there. The missing votes were in the Senate, and there's only a handful, like 3-4 votes, right? So it depends on who you're talking to. That's a harder thing to do, is to get out front on an issue that where so again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, if you reach the level of senator, you have made lots of friends with chiefs of police and mayors. You spend a lot of time on, soccer field sidelines and knowing the coaches and knowing all these things in the community groups. And if those people are talking to you, if those chiefs of police are talking to you and saying, look, this is a bad idea, I don't think you should do it, and you're being reinforced by the soccer coaches that this is really bad, and then even though I'm showing you facts and statistics that say otherwise.
Well, that's earlier you're saying it's about education, but I feel like we've educated till we're blue in the face.
We're sort of. We're educating legislators till we're blue in the face, right? Yeah. So that's a big part of what we do as an advocacy group. It's getting that out to the rank and file folks out there that are influencing them as well, right? So again, those chiefs of police, you talk about law enforcement, there's a lot of law enforcement people who are on board with this. There's a lot of law enforcement who will tell you quietly off the record that they support this and here's why, right? So they know if they're walking into a house party and there's nothing but a bunch of beer going on, that there's going to be a problem. They walk into a house party and they smell weed and they're feeling much more comfortable what they're walking into, right? They know this, and they also know that they don't want to ruin somebody's life, forever, right? So to have a criminal record. So they know that this is something that's healthier and better and stronger, faster, blah, 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 right? So they know this. But that's off the record stuff. But when you get the Chiefs are very influential folks, right? And they've been around, they're 50, 60 years old. I mean, if they're a chief, they've been around the block for a long time. So they're bringing with them the Nancy Reagan era, not the wrong one. Just say no. That was Bill Clinton.
No one else knew.
Yeah, but that was a Bill Clinton quote. But the Nancy Reagan quote was just say no. And they believed that. And they felt like this is something, here's your brain on drugs, sort of mantra. Oh, and we have to break through that barrier. So it really comes down to, we're talking about grassroots, and we got to get to the top. We got to get to the bottom. We got to meet in the middle. And I think we're going to get there. You would be
so proud of me. I just did as you know, I'm doing Atlantic Cape Community College. It was one of the first in the state. I'm teaching a program there. And our first lesson was on the history of cannabis. And I know a lot of the history, but I really want to take a deep dive into it. And I probably know more about the war on drugs and Nixon, Bush, Clinton, which each of them did, and all their agendas, and really, really quite a bit, probably more than I ever wanted to know. But so it's interesting. The most scared, and I generally don't get scared, public speaking, things like this, I absolutely love. But I had to approach the chief of police in one of the towns I was thinking of having a dispensary. So one of the councilmen from the town went in with me, and he introduced me. And it was a chief of police and 2 uniformed officers. And I sat there, and my voice just quivered the entire time. And when we left, he said, "Were you nervous?" I said, "Yes." "Yes, I was terrified."
Yeah.
He said, "Your eye was twitching the entire conversation."
Yeah.
So, it's weird. It's so ingrained, especially as a cannabis user, just be scared of the police.
Well, and that's unfortunate, right? But that's something that's going to change. Generational shifts take a generation, right? Yeah. I mean, just by definition. You look at a lot of the dispensary operators in Jersey, a lot of the security personnel are former law enforcement, right? So, you have the one at South Jersey, their chief of security, the director of security is a retired state trooper. Once they're in there and they actually they get the job and then they actually see patients, and they actually see all these things. I mean, you walk into some of our dispensaries and there are people with wheelchairs, there's people on crutches, people with canes. It is not the Jeff Spicoli's type of personality walks into these dispensaries, right? These are real patients with real conditions. And I think once younger officers see this, they know this to be true, right? So they already know this. But once you get those officers who are in their 40s and 50s and older, that's where you're starting to get into those generational challenges. And again, I think it is time. And one of the best things I do right now is the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice. They issued a report last year. It's a phenomenal report for law enforcement to read, and I send it out whenever I'm asked. It talks about teenage use going down. It talks about DUIs going down. It talks about traffic fatalities for those who are proven to be impaired by THC going down as well. They're showing that through education, regulation, and enforcement that we can actually do good things. And I think that as the industry grows in New Jersey for the patients and hopefully soon adult use, I think more and more people are going to really recognize that the benefit of a regulated industry versus a black market or illicit industry.
So one thing I always say, which I believe to be true, is that when we take adult use legalization, we can move our police force away from petty arrests for possession and put them towards more violent crime or any kind of crime that's actually more helpful to the community. And I always thought that was a positive across the board. And someone said to me recently, yeah, but they actually make money off those low-level arrests, and that in some ways could be working against police support.
You know, and I've heard that too, and maybe in some towns that is the way. I don't think that is predominantly the reason. I think, because I'm a former mayor, right? So I did talk to my chief, the town I'm in now, and I talk to, if I go to football games or whatever, I see all the police there, and I talk to them, and just, just casually asking them questions. I think for the most part, it's just a general concern of public safety versus money. And besides, look, the towns are going to be able to assess up to 2% tax on having a dispensary in their town. So I think for those towns who welcome a dispensary or any of the cannabis, I think all the businesses are going to be allowed to, towns are going to be able to assess at all the different levels. I think that's going to be a benefit to those municipalities. It really will. And I think that those who are generally concerned about public safety, that'll be it. But there's always a knucklehead town here or there where they're more focused on arrest for revenue, and that's unfortunate. They do exist from time to time, but I think for the most part, it's a public safety concern, public safety issue, and I do think they take that seriously. And again, it's just, when you've been trained, so I'm an Army veteran, right? So when you're trained one way the entire time, this is all you believe, and you go, rah, 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 and then someone says, oh, just kidding, it's actually pretty good for you. And it's just hard to make that shift. And I think that's where they're shifting. It's going to take a while. Not everybody trusts the police. I come from a different perspective, being a mayor and having to work with police on the management level. I do know that, at least in the town I was mayor of, that we had a great relationship with the community. And I think as things progress, community resource officers in school will be very valuable in this, and just having that association with law enforcement in a different way, and getting any cannabis prohibition and stopping those arrests and stopping that negative engagement with young people will also be a very positive thing, I think, overall, in developing a better relationship with law enforcement.
Well, it's all about normalization, too. Yeah. And that bias you speak of for officers, I feel like, is the same bias that's been ingrained by the war on drugs, by the reefer madness for older generations, to have that same shift of like, oh, wait, we were wrong. You've been completely miseducated. It's okay. So, I think that's a message across the board.
It's a big transition, right? I mean, you look at, one of the big things, too, talk about conservatives, Republicans, like the gay marriage issue, right? I mean, that was a big debate for a long time. And, oh, my God, what's going to happen if this happens? What are my kids going to do? They're going to marry somebody, blah, blah, blah. It was just a ridiculous mindset I think people had for generations, because that's what they always taught. And then all of a sudden, the Supreme Court just says, oh, it's okay. Nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the world didn't shatter, didn't break, and all of a sudden people who love each other could be legally married. I mean, isn't that fantastic? So I think once we saw what happened, once that became legal and accepted and normalized, no one really cares anymore. It's not that big of an issue for most people. In fact, it's embraced, right? And I think cannabis legalization has had some of the same hurdles, some of the same societal prejudices against it. And now that we're saying, okay, look, it's okay now, but don't just believe me. Here's the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice report. Here's the American Medical Journal report. Here's all these studies from Israel, from the United States, from Canada that says it's okay, and here's why. But it's okay if we do it right. And I think that's the way we have to make sure that we do it. We do it right.
Yes, but New Jersey did not legalize gay marriage until it was done federally. So please let's not hope that happens with cannabis.
No, it won't happen with cannabis. I can assure you that. I mean, I think we're so far down the path on
all right,
cannabis
you heard
right
that.
now.
He's guaranteeing that.
I'm guaranteeing that New Jersey will be before the federal government, and that's not because it's just because federal government's going to take a long time. Right now, they're going to do a hearing next week in the United States Senate on the health effects or negative effects of, it's basically, I forget what the title is, but it's basically going to look at the health effects of marijuana, right? So they're calling it marijuana still.
And we spoke about it last time, and I'm also going to have someone coming on to talk about that. But marijuana, and I think this was Scott had some influence on this, is now being used as the illegal term. We're using cannabis, which is actually the scientific name for the plant, because marijuana was used as a political agenda to demonize the Mexican population and brown people in general. Marijuana was the racist term that they basically used, and that was something you've spoken about and actually educated people on to start using the word cannabis. And so much of it is about language too.
100%. It is about language, and words matter. And if you talk to it in more of the scientific and factual terms, and again, not to, look, people like to talk about weed and pot and marijuana, and we all use it interchangeably. And I think when we're not,
how sick of pot puns are you?
I'm so tired of the pot puns.
I know.
I mean, honestly,
I think it's high time that they ended.
Aha, very good.
It's just growing so rapidly now. Yeah, that's awful.
It is awful, but you know what? It is what it is, and it's kind of funny, too. And again, it's look, I don't walk around saying, hey, cannabis all the time. It is weed, for some, and if you're a certain age and you call it what it is. But I don't use marijuana and I don't use pot because I don't know. I'm not a big believer in trigger words necessarily.
Sure.
Like, none of things trigger me, but because this is such a passion of mine now that when someone says pot, I know that they're anti.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's an anti-word. There's a woman, I won't mention her name. She's a former state legislator. She represents the drug treatment industry. And she sent me a note after I announced that we're doing, 3 years ago when we created the NJ CBA, that she goes, I'm upset that you're representing the pot industry. And so from that moment, I'm like, every time I see the word pot, it's an anti-cannabis person. So, yeah, and marijuana is the same way. Look,
I'll tell you a quick story, and I want to hear that. So, there's a mutual friend of ours who that was our safety word, as if, sometimes when you're being adventurous, you have a safety word and you scream out pineapple, and that means stop or whatever. Pineapple is the most often used word. But so we had a word that said, let's get the hell out of this conversation. And if one of us was to use the word pot, we knew it was a poor mission. Yeah, because neither of us would ever use that in regular conversation.
No. And look, potheads, stoners, all those things, it's antiquated. We don't call people who enjoy an alcoholic beverage from time to time boozers. Yeah. I mean, hey, what's up, boozer? You're boozer.
Yeah.
No one uses that. We don't call
lusher.
Yeah, lusher, or we don't say that's hooch. It's like it's alcohol. And it's sort of like why we went from recreational marijuana to recreational cannabis to adult use cannabis, right?
Yes.
So that was sort of the progression over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's just because I'm at a panel discussion last year, this mayor's conference in Atlantic City, and the guy from SAM, Kevin Sabet.
Do you want to tell people what SAM is quickly?
SAM is ironically called Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Smart Approaches to Marijuana is the anti-cannabis world, right? So just in their name, if there's smart approach to anything, they wouldn't say marijuana, right? So, but they have, and I'll go real quick, their foundation, when Smart Approach to Marijuana was established, SAM was established, their funding came straight from Big Pharma. There's no doubt about it. There's evidence to that effect, and while they're denying it today, and maybe it's true today, but their foundation was that Big Pharma trying to get them out. But anyway, so
in states where they've actually lobbied against like Arizona and. Yeah.
Arizona. So glad you brought that up. We're going on a major tangent right now, but no, Arizona. SAM. There's this an opioid. The people that created and manufactured fentanyl is a company called Insys. INSYS. Look it up. Insys spent $500,000 fighting the Arizona adult use ballot question. SAM spent $500,000 fighting the Arizona adult use ballot question. They shared the same staff. They shared the same people. So when we're talking about somebody that was in bed with Big Pharma, in bed with fentanyl of all the drugs, that's that group.
Yes.
So now I'm on stage on a panel with this guy, Kevin, and look, I think I think he believes what he believes. So and that's another thing too that I want to just clarify. Like, people who have a strong belief on this, even though we know that they're wrong, I don't necessarily hate them for being wrong, right? So it's a little bit disliked, but we don't hang out or anything. But I do believe he believes this. But at any rate, so here we are on the same panel. But how do you get in bed with fentanyl manufacturer? I mean, that was just mind blowing. Yeah, money, mind blowing to me. So at any rate, I'm on a panel discussion, and I talk about adult use, and then blah, blah, blah. And then he makes fun of the word adult use, right? It's recreational. It's recreational. They're coming up with this new phrase called adult use. Like, no, it's not a new phrase. I mean, it's called an adult beverage when we're talking about alcohol. So why is it different? We don't call it recreational beverage. Kids would be drinking it, right? I mean, if you're going to have if you're having a family picnic and you have a container that says recreational beverage, I think everybody's going to drink it, including the kids, right? I mean, I think that's just make common sense. So calling it adult use, like adult movies or adult beverage, it's just like people know it's 21 and over, folks.
Sure. Every alcohol sign says, drink responsibly.
That's right.
It's right built into all the messaging.
It's built into it, right? So while people are making, trying to make fun, whether they're calling it adult use now to sound more formal or calling it cannabis instead of pot. No, we're just calling it what it is. It is cannabis. It's not pot, and it is for adults. So we're talking about adult use, period.
Yeah. So you were saying, I guess that was probably League of Municipalities this was last year?
Yeah, Conference of Mayors.
Okay, so we have that coming up again in a few weeks. And so last year I was at the NJCBA booth, and one thing that we talked about that stuck out was someone who came, and they were a councilman somewhere up North Jersey, and they said, well, really the town is just afraid that people are going to be smoking bongs on the corner.
Right.
And we were just like, well, people aren't really using bongs anymore that much, and certainly not on the corner. So what do you think a year later now we're going to see different?
I think what I'm seeing, so, again, just it's anecdotal, talking, amongst my own friends back home and just seeing how people are getting more comfortable with talking about cannabis, right? So the pot, whatever they're calling it, right? So I think as people get more comfortable, because it used to be one of these things you whispered it's cannabis. And people would say it, and you have to whisper it because you don't want anybody to think about anything. But I see people getting much more comfortable with it. Again, federally, there's a lot of movement going on. State by state, things are going on. Illinois just legalized it. Massachusetts, there's active discussions with Governor Cuomo and Governor Murphy and Governor Wolf and others about creating a regional format for cannabis legalization in the Northeast. That's all smart, and I think it makes sense in some level. But I think what's happening now is more and more people, because all these conversations, athletes are coming out. I mean, there's Republicans and Democrats at the national level, the state level, are coming out in favor of this because of education. So I think
we just had on last week Cullen Jenkins, who has a CBD line. So and I know we talked about it briefly, but NJCBA is working with Athletes for Care, and there's a ton of people. It's really helping all over.
And you're right, and the athletes too. I mean, talk about a group of people that they're in the forefront of this issue, and they had to, for the most part, keep it in the closet because they do get drug tested if they're an active athlete. So it's the former athletes that have come out and said, so what I did for my own treatment is when they gave me opioids for my knees or my back pain, I would throw it out, right? Yeah. Because what they were doing is smoking cannabis, right? So, cannabis is a neuroprotectant.
Yes.
When you're particularly
That's where they got the trademark for the U.S. government for CBD, so they could own it and not the people.
Yeah.
It's a neuroprotectant.
It's a neuroprotectant. That's right. Very good.
Yes.
And recovery.
See, I pull some knowledge out sometimes too.
You nailed it.
Do you want to hear something else funny?
Sure.
So I looked this up because I had to educate myself on football in one day before I interviewed him. And so I looked.
Football, you bet.
Yeah, the ball's brown apparently. So the testing window for cannabis, and I don't know if this is every year, but at least the year I looked it up, it ends in early August and it starts on 4/20.
Say it again. What?
The testing window for when players get tested for drug testing for the
very
NFL.
Good.
It starts on 4/20. That's the drug testing period through early August. Well, I was like, they're just screwing with you guys.
They're not just messing with you, man. You're messing with me, man. No, but they do, and they use it for recovery. So it's as preventative medicine. It's also for recovery, and so hockey players, people that have had some major issues where you're getting punched and beaten up all for in practice and in play. For them, it's a big thing. So Athletes for Care, you got people who are in phenomenal shape, 0% body fat, doing amazing things, and they're dramatically intelligent people, and they're talking about this, and you're just like, you're not Jeff Spicoli. This is not what I remember from Cheech and Chong. And so you see people who've reached the pinnacle of human health, and they're saying, it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's so much better when they were giving me, like you talked to Riley Cote, who is a former Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Athletes for Care group. He talks about it all the time. I mean, you look at pictures of him when he was an active player, when it was opioids and alcohol, And that's how players dealt with it. And then so you got a lot of athletes who are dealing with the pain through opioids and alcohol abuse. Now that he switches over to cannabis years ago, and now he sees him. Now you look at a guy like Riley, who's such an amazing advocate for this, and he's in a phenomenal shape, and is just not at all what people think. And it is, when you see a picture from somebody a few years ago when they were on alcohol and opioids for dealing with their pain or whatever their issues are, to where they are today. I mean, I talked to a gentleman. I was reached out to by a guy I hadn't seen for, 5 or 6 years. I used to work with him when I worked at Lockheed Martin. And, he calls me up out of the blue, and he's just telling me his story. And that's his story, too. He was 280 some odd pounds, and he's now down to 170. I mean, he lost a whole human being. And it was all because he gave up alcohol and opioids, and he's using cannabis for his medical needs.
And you hear that story again and again. And something that I think is heartbreaking is I asked Cullen, I said, so are they testing for CBD? Because I could see THC testing. It's an intoxicant. It could, affect you in certain ways. But CBD is absolutely not. And he said, you know what? The amount of things they test for, they literally give you like a Bible. And he's like, I won't even take a multivitamin. Because I'm so terrified.
Right.
So it just seems like, is it lobbying? Like, how do we get the NFL? Is it ever going to help to say this is something players need while they're active, not just after they're retired and the brain damage CTE is done, but as that neuroprotectant while they're getting hit?
We're getting there, right? So the World Health Organization, took CBD off the ban list. A lot of other organizations have done that as well. The Players Association, so they've been advocating for, so the Active Players Association, they've been advocating for CBD and THC. You're talking about cannabis in general. And there's still resistance. And I think the NFL, I think you're going to see, what you will probably see is the NHL taking the lead on this. They seem to be much more progressive and forward-leaning on things like this. They are looking out for their players. Those guys get brutalized. So football is a very, this is my favorite sport. It's a very violent sport, right? And those guys get beat up once a week. NHL players get beat up multiple nights during the week. They have very little time for recovery. That's why cannabis as a neuroprotectant and recovery tool is very important for them. So stop feeding them the opioids. Give them this option. Look, sometimes an opioid's not a bad thing if you use it in limited duration. Like if you're coming out of a surgery or major injury, that's probably going to be good for you for a limited time, say 3, 4, 5 days or whatever the condition is, and then transition over to cannabis. But that's a major injury. But if you're just talking day-to-day violence, which goes on at the NHL, right? I mean, the damage that they do to their bodies is so significant to play that sport. That's why I think you're going to see the NHL probably leading the way on this.
Okay, that's pretty good. But in a lot of ways, too, they're also significant injuries quite frequently. So
yeah, no doubt. And even today, just driving up here, forget what the report was, but NBA players, right? So NBA players, they have the sleep deprivation that a lot of these athletes go through. Your body needs 8 hours plus, a night and so forth. Most normal people do that.
He points at me as I said last week. I did the interview questions between 2 and 4 in the morning, and then went back to bed. I'm a complete insomniac.
But it is about your health and your welfare, right? And being able to get good night's rest. And for a lot of people, cannabis is part of that process. So you can, if you take a couple of puffs or whatever it is, an edible to help you get to sleep, to help you sleep soundly through the night. And while you're sleeping soundly through the night, your body's recovering. I think that's a great tool. And a lot of these players who crisscross across the country, that for them is I think would be a needed tool. But again, those are professional athletes. There's so many people in similar circumstances too that put their body to the test on a daily basis. They're construction workers or otherwise. And so when that's been a heated discussion, well, what about construction workers? What about this? What about that? And that's where CBD can be such a valuable tool, recovery tool. And so when we're okay with in the workplace, opioids in the workplace, we're okay with cough syrup in the workplace, we're okay with other things that make us a little dopey in the workplace. But God forbid, I had smoked a joint last night to help me sleep, right? So we're talking about making adjustments, not just we're talking about athletes, of course, but earlier, but talking about our workplace, talking about schools, talking about different things. I mean, those kids who have significant issues who are on prescribed medical cannabis, they have to jump through so many hurdles, get lawyers involved just to allow their school to allow them to have that. But if it's an opioid, or something like that, or some other a benzo or something like that, that's okay. You can do that. Just go down to the nurse and she'll give it to you, right? So there's not an equivalency for cannabis yet, but we're going to get there. It just takes time.
That was something in the New Jersey bill I helped inform on. Was at the end of it, I remember not only about being able to administer cannabis at school, but even it got so detailed as on a school bus. For the precise times that students would need their medication. So I guess it is being addressed, but not federally at this point.
It's slowly being addressed, and even then, it's even like with gay marriage. We're going back to that. Even though when it was allowable, some certain hospitals, when New Jersey didn't have gay marriage, but they had the they had the civil union, which is not marriage, but it was as close as the state could get at the time, right? Yes. So, but even under the civil union, talking to when I was talking to friends of mine, and they could not go in and go see their partner because the hospital, even though it was state law, the hospital didn't.
You had gay friends as a Republican?
I still have gay friends. I have gay family members. Yes.
They haven't kicked you out yet?
No.
You're going to get a notice in the mail.
Again. Conservative value. When you talk about this, there's a difference between being a conservative and being a religious. What's the word I'm looking for? If I'm using religion as part of my politics, I'm probably doing it a little bit wrong, right? I mean, so for me, it's sort of like less government opportunities, and so we're talking about gay marriage or otherwise. The less government, the better. Government shouldn't really be involved in marriage anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see to have some legal document.
I need them involved for my divorce. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But you know what I'm saying. So at the end of the day, I think it's just I don't know what we were talking about before, but when we're talking,
you having gay friends.
I have gay friends.
I don't know. Well, you were comparing civil unions and marijuana legalization.
Yeah, I know, but I think I forget where we got lost track on. But at the end of the day, though, what we were talking about, I think it's just the normalcy of it and how we normalize it. And how so we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about it. We shouldn't be ashamed. Like no one, on Facebook all day long. I mean, you can see, it's always a joke. You get some mom somewhere talking about red wine and she's drinking wine, and it's like that's okay.
Slay all day, then rosé.
Yeah. It's sort of like that's okay.
Yeah.
But somebody posts, an article on cannabis this or cannabis that, and it's like it's shunned. It's frowned upon.
No, we need to normalize this because I want people to be able to bring my products as Christmas gifts or holiday gifts, I should say, instead of a bottle of wine.
Absolutely. It's healthier.
It's healthier, absolutely, and I'm going to package it better. So let's talk for a moment on federal. Two things I want to get across. Without weighing in on personal opinion, what president...
That's all I have.
Well, too bad. I don't want your personal politics getting involved right now. I want you to objectively say what candidate do you think has our best chance for federal legalization, and what do you predict with some states still not even having medical, some really red states out there who are holdouts? Where's the tipping point on this for federal legalization?
Well, it's interesting. I think you have every major Democrat running for president right now, with the exception of Joe Biden, supports adult use or supports legalization, ending prohibition, right?
Biden only wants decrim,
right?
Which means I don't want him.
I don't think he's got a chance at the end of the day, but that was my personal opinion. No, I think when you look at the candidates who are running, and I know this is a bad word to say, but even President Trump supports legalization.
Boo.
But he does. And he said so publicly.
He's done a lot of good stuff the past 4 years for cannabis.
Cannabis. And so, again, we won't go outside the...
Was that not sarcasm?
No, he has. No, he has. Actually, when you look at what he was... Well, first of all, he hasn't done anything because nothing's reached his desk. But he has pledged on the campaign trail and as President of the United States that he would support, if the bill came to his desk, he would support it. He assured Senator Cory Gardner from Colorado, Republican, that he would do so. And that was a discussion. And that was part of a heated even discussion with Jeff Sessions and getting him out of there. That was an issue, too. So it's not like he's done a lot because there's not a lot for him to do.
Is it because things right now are Republican controlled and everything gets
the
shot
Democrats,
down before it gets to him?
No. I mean, that's since 2016. I mean, you look at the House has been controlled by the Democrats, and they have now moved forward So we got Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who, ushered through, with the help of all the other sponsors and whatnot, the Safe Banking Act, which is historic, right?
Yes.
So that's historic.
And that's still on the table as of today,
Well,
right?
it's still on the table. The Senate's supposed to take that up on the Senate Banking Committee. They were supposed to take it up this month, so I suspect they're going to take it up next month. But there's a general belief that the Safe Banking Act will be passed and signed into law by this president by the end of the year, so early January, that time frame. But going back to your earlier question about which candidate, so again, discarding Trump, the candidates who I think have the best chance, they all are there except for Biden, right? So it doesn't seem to me that it doesn't matter who it's going to be. So I don't want to delve into each individual campaign thought process, but they all seem to be pretty good on it. I mean, obviously our own senator who's running for president, Cory Booker, Senator Booker, has been a long time advocate, has done an amazing job. So if I'm going to pick the best person, how about that? So if I'll pick the best person who's going to usher this through, it'll be our very own Senator Cory Booker.
Awesome. And so then, if that happens, you think we get it done in 4 years?
Oh, we're going to get done before then. I really do believe that. I think that the first thing that we're going to, after the Safe Banking Act, I think the next thing we're going to see is the States Act. Now that may take.
I thought the States Act became the Safe Banking Act.
No, they're two separate bills. So the States Act, what that does, it doesn't federally legalize cannabis, but it federally recognizes state laws, which is the way the federal government is supposed to be. We're a small f federal, right? So we're not this. We should not be this overarching control country where the federal government leads everything. We were designed. I mean, when we originally were formed as a country, strong state, big S state, right? So that big S. We're a big S state, but a big S. I am a big S, but yeah, thank you. But on the state level, that's where you see democracy at work. And so, under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, not to bore you, but
Too late.
Minute 3. But the 10th Amendment of the Constitution allows for intrastate commerce not to be messed with by the federal government. And so that's what we're going to see. The States Act is basically going to acknowledge what the Constitution already says. And so if states want to legalize, have at it, everybody, the federal government's going to recognize it's going to be great. But if Idaho, you still want to have nothing going on, well, we're not going to force you to do something you don't want to do, which, again, is what the federal government should be doing. It's basically saying, you're okay, guys. If you guys want to do it, great. If you guys don't want to do it, that's up to you. But it's going to be a state-by-state thing under the States Act. So I think that's actually...
So wait, did you say interstate? Where if
Intra. So within the borders of a state...
So we wouldn't be able, because I know reciprocity for patients, but we can't have interstate trade, which would be game-changing if we could send this across state lines. But.
It would be game-changing. And it would be... You would talk about a shift on... We're such at the infancy stage of this industry. I mean, it's been around for many years now, but we really don't even know what this is going to look like when it's all said and done. I mean, once you start to have... open borders, if you will, with regard to cannabis, and going from New Jersey to Pennsylvania to Ohio and so forth and so on. I mean, that's a dramatic shift. So if we're able to transport product, whether I'm selling it wholesale from Kentucky to New Jersey or vice versa, it's going to be a real game changer when it comes. But we're not there yet. We're ways away. But I do think we're going to get the Safe Banking Act done within the next few months, and I do think that the States Act has a strong opportunity. Probably a bit after the presidential election. I think you're going to see that. And I think, so then you're looking at 2021 at the federal level, because we're going to have, I mean, I don't know who's going to win, because we don't even know who the Democrat nominee is going to be yet. There's some other people who are sort of on the sidelines, sort of waiting to jump in on what's going to happen. So it's hard to predict who the two, well, we know one's going to be Trump, but who the other person's going to be and what happens. But I think in 2021, that's when we're going to see the States Act passed.
Okay. And then what year do you think federal legalization?
I don't know how that's going to shape up, because it's States Act, I think, is going to be there for a while. Okay. I mean, there may be some other elements at the federal level. So again, maybe it's social justice, maybe it's arrests, or maybe it's expungement or something like that could also happen. So you get rid of the federal criminality of it and things like that should happen. But as far as like it's legal, States Act's essentially doing that. It's just saying, Idaho, I use Idaho as an example because they definitely don't like cannabis there. Yeah. At least not officially, but a lot of people that live there do.
That's everywhere.
That's everywhere. But I think, but if a state doesn't want to have it, then the state doesn't have to have it. I mean, it's not a constitutional right or something like that. But certainly if the voters want to have it in Idaho like they do here, then they'll get it eventually.
All right. So we have a lot of exciting things coming up for NJCBA. You want to talk about a couple of them as we wrap up here?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of good things coming up. I mean, when we established ourselves, we want to make sure that we were a trade organization. Again, a lot of it came down to education. We want to make sure we're not just educating and lobbying lawmakers and community leaders, but we want to get into education. So, we had a career fair with Stockton University. One of our great partnerships is with Stockton, and we reached out to Atlantic Cape Community College. We have a great partnership there. You are teaching there now. We have a great relationship with Union County College. So what we're trying to do now is we're helping develop curriculum. We're helping with workshops. We're helping with educational programming. And I can't mention company names or anything, but I've had really solid meetings in the past week with very prominent organizations who would love to help out on the educational side, would love to help out with developing some of the programs that we're doing. And again, so when we talk about education, it's not just informing people about the pros and cons of legalization, but it's like getting the next generation workforce ready, right? So, you get it a lot too. I get a lot. People are looking for jobs right now. They want jobs right now. We're still at 6 dispensaries that are operating. Soon there'll be 12. And with the next round coming out, there'll be 36 and so forth and so on. So as the industry grows, we want to make sure that we're helping develop professional standards. We're helping develop the workforce. And we want to make sure people are ready for it and transitioning into this from a different industry too. I mean, that's a big thing, right? So it's easy for it to...
Well, the one thing I always say, because you're right, people do ask me that a lot. And people just look at the 6 or 7 dispensaries we have and say, oh, well, those are the only jobs in the state. But they're not. When you talk about transitioning, I always tell people, whatever you do, there's a job for cannabis in it. If you're, a doctor, a lawyer, if you're an accountant, if you're in retail. The only person who tripped me up recently was someone said, well, I'm a hairdresser. And I said, I don't know where that job is in cannabis. But
CBD hair cream.
There you go.
All right, let's do it. Let's start it. You can do it.
Okay.
We're going to do it.
I'm calling Sephora. All right. So, but generally most of the skills are very transferable. So that's why I say get the training now, set yourself apart, and then as either you can try something entrepreneurial or when the jobs come, you'll be ready.
100%. I think that's the thing. It's the green rush. We joke about it because there's no such thing, right? The green rush has been the slowest drip.
There's actually money creeping under the door of the studio right now. It's just flooding in.
So the green rush is a fun term to use because everybody wanted to jump in, and the reality is it's taken a long time, and it just does. It is a normal industry when it comes down to it. So if you get a dispensary, if you were recently approved to be a new license holder in the last round that was announced in December, none of those guys are up and running yet, and it's because general business concerns, right? So you got to talk to your investors. You got to get approval from the town. What if the town is opposing you all of a sudden in this thing, or your retention basin didn't meet the township standards? It's just a business at that point, and so it necessarily takes time. But I think
I heard babies are drowning.
No, but that's a real issue for one of the dispensary operators. Is like they're in a town and they can't get the town zoning approved because their retention basin has an issue, right? So they have to do that. But if I was, if a shopping mall, I'd have the same retention pond issues, right? So it is, at the end of the day, a business that has to deal with real world circumstances, and again, a lot of it comes down to as well as people had to. Because it's not federally legal, you don't have your traditional methods of raising revenue, raising money for your new business or your new enterprise. You can typically go to a bank or maybe even get an EDA, an Economic Development Authority grant or something like that for other businesses. If I want to open up a dry cleaner, there's a whole bunch of methods for me to go and generate money or raise money or borrow money from a bank. It's not that way here. And so for a lot of these other companies that are struggling right now, I mean, big companies, not just the small companies, big companies are struggling because they have to figure out how to pay back investors.
Yeah, that's banking is a huge concern, and that's something I know we're trying to remedy right now because you're giving away giant chunks of equity of your company to get financing where most people would be able to get a small business loan or something a little bit more realistic. So all right, so I just want to, before we wrap up, talk a little about how people can join NJCBA and where they can find out more and get involved.
Sure. So again,
I could do it if you want. It's up to you.
Well, no, but that's when we set ourselves up as an organization, it's a business organization. Business is in the name, New Jersey CannaBusiness. But unlike every other trade group, one of the things we did do is set up a grassroots level, right? So it's for $42. Yeah, it's a spinoff of 420. It's for $42. It's an entry membership. And what you're doing with that $42, it helps fund all of the lobbying efforts. It helps fund all of our educational programs. So we're a nonprofit organization. So, so people who are, very interested, they're a patient, they're a social justice warrior. They just think cannabis should be legal and people should be left alone. Whatever their passion is, there's a space for them. And they do have an impact on the outcome, what's going on in New Jersey. And then on the other membership levels, we have business memberships for different categories, different levels of how you like to be involved. And again, that helps, keeps the lights on, helps all of our efforts on educational programming, talking to legislators and so forth. So those are a big deal for us. And so joining, you can go to our website, www.NewJerseyCannaBusiness.com, NewJerseyCannaBusiness.com.
Yes.
And we're also
not cannabis business.
Cannabis,
all one word, canna business.
New Jersey Canna, CANNA, business.com.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for making me
Hey,
have
it's
to spell.
7:58, 58 minutes after 7 o'clock. Coming to you live.
Thank you for making me have to spell that for my email every time I use it.
Yeah, isn't it annoying?
It was very annoying.
We're going to have to figure that out someday.
So we also have monthly networking events. Please come out. People always ask me how to get involved in the industry. That's a great way.
Yeah.
We'll have a hemp and CBD workshop coming up. So lots of good stuff. Follow NJCBA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're everywhere.
We are everywhere.
All right.
I think we have a TikTok account coming up.
Really?
I don't know. We should.
I'm going to be dancing. Awesome. All right, Scott, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Trailblazers out there, please rate, review, and subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every week. Follow me on social media. I am Instagram, Facebook, Twitter as Blazin Bakery. That's BLAZIN Bakery. You can also learn more and check out our products at blazinbakery.com. As always, my name is Tara Misu. Love you all and keep on trailblazing.